Ray Dalio, founder and co-chairman and co-investment officer of Bridgewater Associates, sits down for an interview with Robin Roberts, co-anchor of Good Morning America on ABC.
Ray, it is so good to spend this time with you and really appreciate all that you do. And I want people to know, word on the street, whether it doesn't matter what walk of life, you treat everybody the same. And we appreciate that very much. For people who don't know you, just give them a little background on yourself, Ray.
Well, I grew up, my dad was a musician, a jazz musician. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. I grew up in a lower middle class family. I went to a public school. I had adequate food. I had adequate health care, and I came out to a world of equal opportunity. And that's all I needed. At 12, I did odd jobs and I collected, I mowed lawns and I caddied and did that things. I put my money in the markets when I was a kid, when I was 12. And I bought a company that only stock I ever heard of that was less than $5 a share, was about to go bankrupt, but somebody acquired it. I was lucky and it tripled and I got hooked.
Yeah, hooked.
I got hooked on the market. So that was my game. I love the game and I played it.
You're good at it. Can I just say that? I mean, the largest hedge fund, Bridgewater. So you're a very humble man. So I'm just gonna let people know what you have been able to create. And what's so wonderful about you, Ray, is that you talk about your humble upbringing and you said you had enough and that you see with your eyes that that's not the case, especially when it comes to healthcare. And you've done something with that. You've been extremely philanthropic, extremely generous, especially with New York Presbyterian Hospital, establishing a center there that you really wanted to address racial and ethnic disparities in healthcare. What have you learned about the opportunities to be able to bridge that gap, Ray?
Well, we've done the same in education and food security. And it's education, assuring the basics of education, food security, and healthcare to the poorest, most stretched populations is a very important thing to my wife and I. And so we've done that in many, many different ways. I won't get into all of them because we won't have time. But in the Health Justice Center, which we created with New York Presbyterian Hospital, there are so many different ways in poor neighborhoods that conditions are so much different. There's also different genetics for the populations, things like diabetes and so on, and food care. So we've done a lot there. We've in education, we've taken on what we try to get high school students who would be dropping out or are out of the system through the system and to try to have healthcare. So we've done a lot of things. We bought computers, 60,000 computers for kids who, when we found out that education was going to stop and it had to be online, they needed computers and so on. So we're just generally, we're trying to have our impact a bit. Now, the problems are so enormous and it's so unfair. We're just trying to lift those up a little bit to the extent we can do that because, in a sense, I relate to them and I think that it's just so terrible that our society does not establish a bottom, a floor of which people should not be allowed to go, particularly children. I could tell you at length about the crime environments that they have to put up. To be successful in these communities is very difficult. So we're affected by that. We do a lot, microfinance to help them have jobs. Anyway, a lot.
A lot,
but so little. A lot, but so little.
you see, but if more of us were to do, this is what this conference is about. So people can see that we're coming together and it's everybody doing their part. So yes, you're dealing with the healthcare issues, but also because we've had a conversation or two, the environment is very, very important to you and to your family. The oceans, where does that love come from and being so passionate about marine life and the ocean?
Well, in my 20s, I started learning how to dive, and then nature has always had a big effect on me. I feel better in nature. I admire nature. I think we're all part of nature. And that brought me into the ocean. And then I got excited about the ocean, and I realized it's our greatest asset. If you look at the ocean, that's like a sheet. And on all the land above the ocean is about only 1/3 of the space beneath the surface of the ocean, and it's unexplored. And it's so important it is the biggest environmental thing we have. It's our biggest asset. It's not explored, and it's very important in terms of the whole ecology. I believe that nature is very much part of our community. We're part of nature in that whole cycle. So it thrills me to support explorers and scientists who are going down there, and then to bring that up. And so to do that, I've created a fabulous research ship and media, which is pursued is used by those scientists. And we're going to be bringing it through National Geographic and Disney to the public. So individuals will be able to experience that the same way Jacques Cousteau brought it. And kids, even in schools, nowadays with remotes, can control the devices that are down in the ocean, 6,000 meters. So I'm very excited about helping not only to protect it, but to excite others with it. That's one of the things I'm excited about.
I can just see you light up when you're talking about this. And you know what? It's something, this past year, because of the pandemic, there's no silver lining to what we've gone through with the loss of life. We have seen, though, marine life. If people notice, the oceans are cleaner. What lessons can we learn from this past year? And we learn?
I think there's intellectual learning, and then I think there's visceral learning. And I think you could then say that you can change and create a better environment and all of that. I don't think that has much impact. When you fall in love with it, when you see it and you're excited by it, in a sense, you get to see it directly, and then you're emotionally engaged in it. And then you will understand the consequences. It's like, I guess smoking and then being able to see a section of the lung or something. To be able to see what you're talking about and to see the life and realize that we're connected to the life. We're as much dependent on the ocean as the ocean is dependent on us, more so. So that's what I'm excited about doing. Yes, intellectually, you can take the numbers, the species that are being lost, and then we can go on at length in terms of what that means for the environment, the air quality, what it means for our consumption, what it means in so many different climate, what the impact that the ocean has on climate and what impact that has on our lives in so many different ways. We can rattle those things off, but unless we feel it and care about it, I don't think it's going to make much difference.
You've been a wonderful author, and I understand that you also have a new book that is coming out, and I'm very excited about it. And it's called The Changing World Order: Why Nations Succeed or Fail. You argue the future will be radically different. Now, what I want to ask you, is that good or is that bad? When you're talking about it's going to be radically different in the future.
Well, the forces, there are three main forces. There's a large wealth, values gap and political gap that is raising the risks of a civil war. I went back and I studied history over the last 5 years, and these patterns happen all along. There is a conflict that's brewing internally. there's the rise of a great power, China, to be comparable. That's an issue. And then there's a financial issue in terms of the creation of lots of debt and printing a lot of money devalues the money. And when you lose the financial benefit at the same time as people are at each other's throats, and then you have international challenges, that confluence of events is a very, very threatening confluence of events. That's also one of the reasons I'm excited about this conference, because when we get back to like, what is it that we need to do to make our future good? Well, it is largely being good with each other. In other words, it's not fighting. It is understanding that the conflict that we're seeing internally and externally, and the difficulties we face, financial difficulties, as well as environmental difficulties such as the pandemic and so on. If we approach that with love and harmony, to be able to say it's a common problem rather than fight over it, that is our only chance of having a good outcome.
And what makes you hopeful about the future? That is
man's capacity to adapt. Man's the inventiveness. This has been out through history. Man's is a unique species in being able to invent and adapt. And that's really the greatest force in the universe. So if we can be together and we can adapt well together, we have a bright future. There is enough resources to go around. The amount of resources in the world are at an all-time peak. And if we can do that together in a together way, with that adaptation, that is a great potential that we have. And if we don't, we're going to go through a decade of hell. So that's our choice, I think.
It's our choice. We're not going to let that happen. Not on our watch, right, Ray? Not on our watch.
We'll do our best.
We always do. And thank you. And it just shows the creativity. Normally we would be all together in Rome for this conference, but we find a way to be creative. And I think when there are endless when people are uncertain, that just means there are endless possibilities. Uncertainty leads to endless possibilities. And thank you for making so much possible for so many people, Ray Dalio.
Well, thank you, Robin.